tight. We got the salt on it. Never touches the human hand.
Very good. Very
Nice
good.
and full.
Thank you.
Good. This is fun. I could do this all day. I wouldn't mind this job. I like this job. I think I might come back and do it again. Now I have worked at McDonald's. I've now worked for 15 minutes more than Kamala.
And still nobody can prove that Kamala ever worked at a McDonald's. And they've looked at the records and nobody can prove it. Joining us now to talk about French fries and burgers, Brooke Rollins, my dear friend, president and CEO of the America First Policy Institute, Mark Simone, WOR Hall of Fame radio host, and Joe Concha, Fox News contributor and author of Progressively Worse, Why Today's Democrats Ain't Your Daddy's Donkeys. Brookie, I'm going to welcome to you. Nobody likes to eat McDonald's as much as our former boss does.
That's true.
We know that. But Mark Simone and others, and I put the question to Elise Stefanik, who's a very smart woman. This Al Smith dinner, not going to the Al Smith dinner in New York, and now the McDonald's, these could be major turning points for the entire campaign. All of a sudden, everyone is talking about Trump, and they're talking about him favorably, and all the stuff about he's a fascist and he's done this and done that. It's just water off a duck's back. How's that? I just made that up.
I love it. That was so good. You know, the history will judge, I believe, these last few days as an inflection point in the race to win the country back. And I know we see it in the polls. In 16, he was down 7 or 8 against Clinton. In 20, he was down, according to the polls, 7-8 against Biden. Today, he's up in every swing state by a little bit. But we see every day that trend continue. And I think we'll look back and we'll say the Al Smith dinner, her not attending, I thought he was extremely charming and actually hysterical. The Donald Trump that we knew in the Oval Office every single day for 3 years. And then the McDonald's, I mean, the forgotten men and women, the people that he represents, those Americans driving through the drive-thru, him leaning out to give them their French fries and their burger. That's the Donald Trump that we love, and that's who's going to win.
I liked it, actually. The more you see of this thing, I liked it. The McDonald's manager was giving him instructions how to do the fries, and he was reacting very well to those instructions. That's not necessarily typical, but he got the same thing. He got it right, though. He got it right. And you think all this is a turning point, Mark Simone?
Yeah, Donald Trump's a champion golfer. He wins club championships. The secret of that, you come alive on the 17th and 18th hole.
Ooh.
You do your best work. That started with the Al Smith dinner. McDonald's. Hey, people forget. He owns 100 restaurants. Yeah. And every one of his restaurants has the best hamburgers and French fries. There are 2 or 3 of them in every hotel and club. And this guy's purchased millions in kitchen equipment. And he's famous for always going in the kitchen to talk to everybody, see everything. He's comfortable there. He's got a larger-than-life personality. We know Kamala doesn't. That's the advantage. He's doing Joe Rogan on Friday. That's going to be the home run that clears the bases. That's going to be big.
Well, he's fearless. He's absolutely fearless. Yeah. You're dead right on that. Joe, I think the barbershop stuff is very interesting, too. It's like a 1-2-3 hit, okay? Al Smith, McDonald's, the barbershops. He's hit 2 or 3 barbershops. He goes in there. Yeah, he's a billionaire, but he's from Queens, okay? They get it. They're from the Bronx or wherever they get it from in Center City, Philadelphia. I mean, this stuff, first of all, it's brilliant campaigning. And second of all, he's had a lot of fun doing it. Have you noticed that?
That's the thing.
She looks like she just had the flu in the worst way possible, and she's not getting any good meds.
And this barbershop, very good. This barbershop wasn't in Texas or Alabama. It was in the Bronx, right? Yeah. Could you picture ever Kamala Harris going into a red state in a place where she may not be warmly accepted? Of course, that's never going to happen. You could always tell who's winning in a campaign by who's having a good time on the campaign trail. As far as these inflection points you're talking about, I agree. Al Smith and McDonald's. But before that, the VP debate. Boy, that changed the trajectory completely. Then the Butler PA rally goes back there and finishes what he starts. And then Kamala Harris's media blitz, where, again, we'll say it once, we'll say it again. She's the first Democrat ever to screw up an interview on The View, but somehow she did it because she couldn't answer how she's going to be different from Biden over the last 4 years. But that Fox News interview was watched by more people than any interview during this campaign season.
That was a bomb, wasn't it? I mean, the Fox News interview, the Brett Baier is a great newsman. Brett Baier, it was a bomb. She bombed.
She did. And I will say, too, the next inflection point, I believe, will be this Sunday night here in New York City at Madison Square Garden, where I heard today from a legitimate source that they already have enough requests to fill Madison Square Garden 6 times over. 6 times over.
Are you going to get us all tickets to get in there?
Well, I may know some people who know some people, but it's going to be incredible, and that is his venue. These are his people. There are going to be people from all over the country flying in, but the vast majority are coming from Blue New York, who are sick and tired of what this country is facing under a Kamala regime.
And juxtapose that with what we're seeing today, or what we're not seeing today, guys. Guess how many campaign events Kamala Harris has with 14 days till a presidential election?
I can't imagine this because it's zero. It's zero.
Yeah.
How is that possible?
It's possible because she has 2 interviews tomorrow with NBC News and Telemundo, so she's prepping. At this point, 3.5 years into your vice presidency, and after campaigning for 3 months, you still need a full day to prep for NBC?
By the way,
Shut the front door.
Mark, 60 Minutes still won't release the raw transcript from that interview where they turned the word salad into an anti-Israel specific. But the fact is they won't release it. It's still a hot... I'm reading about it in the New York Post this morning. That story won't go away.
Well, the transcript either clears them completely or it shows there were a million edits and that they were totally guilty. They will not release the transcript. They've done it many times before. They will not do it. That tells you they're guilty.
And by the way, that interview went 46 minutes. We only saw 21 minutes. Can you imagine what that 25 minutes that they're hiding looks like?
Could be grim.
Yeah, I think so.
Really.
It's the Robert Hur tapes all over again.
I don't think I want to know what's in there.
Joining me now is the former U.S. ambassador to Poland. She is former RNC Finance Committee co-chair and Republican fundraiser and entrepreneur, Georgette Mosbacher. Georgette, great to see you.
Very good to be back,
Thank
Maria.
you so much for being here. And I wanted to start really, we're going to go back to Ukraine in a second, but I want to get your take on Poland. You are the ambassador to Poland, and you see that in Poland there are lots of Polish people here in America, in Pennsylvania, and you think that they have a real stake in this election. Tell us about that.
Look, there's 10 million Poles in the United States, 800,000 Polish Americans in Pennsylvania. And I think I'd like to remind them of the fact that 3 presidents promised them visa waiver. 3. But it was Donald Trump that delivered it. 10,000 American troops. He delivered the 5th Corps headquarters, which is now a permanent base and the hub for the military supplies going into Ukraine. He also $1 million for a feed study for civilian nuclear, which never happened under Biden. And he had me finish the Aegis Ashore missile defense system, which Obama had canceled.
Oh, yeah, good point.
So I could go on.
Yeah.
But these were major issues.
Well, we had
Trump wanted me to strengthen the eastern flank of NATO, and that's what we did in Poland.
Well, you're right. We had the president of Poland here in the studio a couple of weeks ago, and President Duda told me that it is in every Polish American's interest to vote in this election. You make the great point that 800,000 Polish Americans are in Pennsylvania right now. Do you think that's a must-win state for this?
I think it's a key state
Election.
I think it is. It may be the linchpin state, and 800,000 Polish Americans. If they just stop and think of what president, no other president in history has delivered as much as Donald Trump. President Trump went twice to Poland and invited President Duda twice to the White House.
They have a nice relationship. You can see it.
They have a great relationship.
Yeah, and Duda, it looks like Duda is a real Trump fan. Meanwhile, Israel says that it killed another Hezbollah official. Widely expected to be the group's next leader, this next terrorist that they took down. The airstrike in Beirut also killed 25 other Hezbollah leaders after the death of the former Hezbollah chief, Hassan Nasrallah. That was last month, as you know.
Right.
The FBI also confirmed its investigation of a possible U.S. leak of classified documents. These documents, Georgette, showed Israel's plans for retaliation against Iran. No wonder Bibi Netanyahu is not sharing information with the U.S. anymore, in my view.
You know, I don't understand this, because I can tell you as ambassador, when it came to classified material, it was so closely held that this is clearly the deep state. And there is no reason why that they haven't figured out by now who it was that leaked that. There are only a handful of people who look at this classified material. This was done on purpose, and this was done because they could. And that's the problem. There is clearly a lack of control in both the Pentagon and the agencies that are supposed to keep these things safe.
Well, I mean, isn't this an issue for President Trump? Should he return to the White House? I mean, an ongoing issue. We're going to talk with John Ratcliffe. John Ratcliffe's coming in the studio in a few minutes, the former director of national intelligence. And look, it feels like with the last time Trump was in office, you saw it, Ambassador. As ambassador, you saw it. You know, as he was in office, there was all this undermining going on, right?
And
so
it's still going on.
It's still going on. So how does he counter that? Should he return?
Well, look, remember, this isn't the only time this has happened.
Yeah, I know.
Under Biden, all right? This also happened with Ukraine. And so this is a pattern of this White House. And the only way this is stopped is there's got to be a tight hold on these things.
And consequences.
And consequences. I mean, and how do these people get access? The Ukraine one was a National Guardsman that leaked that. How does a National Guardsman have access to highly classified material?
Well, who has access to Israel's retaliation plan against Iran?
That's the point. We're not talking about thousands of people. We're talking about a handful of people.
Yes, right. So they should be able to know who leaked it, right?
Believe me, they should know who leaked it.
And
I don't believe this was an accident.
Yeah.
I believe this was planned.
So here we are inside of 2 weeks, 13 days away from Election Day. Ambassador, tell us about this. Kamala Harris has the cash edge over Donald Trump. How is that possible? Harris's campaign raised nearly $222 million in September. $222 million for the month, pushing her fundraising total to over $1 billion. The Trump campaign, meanwhile, brought in $63 million last month. So, I mean, Ambassador Mosbacher, you were also the former RNC Finance Committee co-chair. Tell us about this gap. What's happening here? And does this matter?
Well, at this point, I don't think it does matter all that much. However, you have to remember that the debate between Trump and Biden, all of a sudden the donors stopped writing checks after that debate.
Good point, yeah.
All right. Then there's 2 months of Kamala Harris. And so all that bent up money that was sitting on the sidelines after that debate has now poured in. But frankly, we have 2 weeks left. And the difference between her having a little bit more money than Trump, at the end of the day, this is going to be about a ground game, and it's not going to count that much because it's too late.
Yeah. Well, you make a good point. We're 2 weeks away, but it's interesting to see her racking up all of this money while she's not giving us any information about anything. She doesn't articulate a plan. She doesn't articulate, what she's going to do. She keeps flip-flopping back and forth on fracking, on this, on Medicare for all. You mentioned Polish Americans in this country who are potentially about to vote. Do you think they care about the fracking issue, about the flip-flopping issue?
Fracking issue? Let me put this in perspective. While I was ambassador to Poland, we sold so much LNG to Poland that they did not renew their contract with Gazprom. They were independent of Russian gas and oil. That's extraordinary. And why did that happen? Because we had the LNG to sell them. And under this administration, we have closed down fracking. And Pennsylvania is one of the leading states for fracking.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine Pennsylvania not going for Trump.
All right, we will leave it there. Ambassador Georgette Mousebacher, great to see you. Welcome back. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's economic and tax policies in focus with just 13 days to go until voters head to the polls on Election Day. The Wall Street Journal editorial board writes this: Mr. Trump's overall economic agenda is superior to Kamala Harris's model of tax, spend, mandate, and regulate. But his tariff agenda is an anti-growth wildcard that poses considerable economic risk in a second term. Now, this has been the thoughts thoughts of the Journal for some time. I sat down with President Trump on Sunday Morning Futures earlier this month to discuss his policies, and he told me all of that talk of tariffs are just threats. Watch this.
You even introduced this 15% corporate tax rate for companies who produce in America and hire American workers. But how will you pay for it? The Committee for a Responsible Budget says your plans will increase the debt by $7.5 trillion.
But they don't know.
The Wall Street Journal said that your plans will increase the debt and deficits more than Kamala Harris's.
If I do this, you're going to have car companies coming back to the country because of the taxes and the tariffs. The tariffs will protect them when they come in. Tariffs are a very beautiful word. It's a word that's going to make our country rich again.
What about the criticism, and the Journal has done this as well, that if you do put something like a 200% tariff on a product, that it's only going to mean higher prices for consumers?
No, it's not. No, it doesn't mean that.
It's got to be passed on somehow.
No, Ray. All I'm doing is saying, I'll put 200 or 500. I don't care. I'll put a number where they can't sell one car into the United. I don't want them to sell the car because I don't want them hurting our car companies.
How are you going to pay for all of this no tax on stuff? And you said that there's a lot of fat in government
growth.
that you're going to save money.
I gave you an answer, growth.
And it is about growth. Joining me now is Paulson & Company President and founder, John Paulson. John, great to see you.
Hey, good morning, Maria.
Thank you so much for being here. What did you make of that back and forth with President Trump and me? Is it just a threat, these tariffs?
I think,
are we seeing growth?
The 200,000 is a threat, but the general, the general concept of using tariffs to protect and stimulate American industry is something that's necessary.
Tell me about it.
Well, there's a theoretical concept that free trade benefits everybody, but we're not in a free trade world. U.S. only charges, on average, a 2% tariff on imported goods. That's much less than other countries. As a result, everyone can sell here unlimited quantities, while we're restricted in what we can sell in other countries. So now we have a $1.2 trillion trade deficit, and that's been devastating to American manufacturing, American jobs, American wages, and American communities. So we have to rectify that situation. If we can't get free trade deals, the way to do that is with tariffs.
And President Trump has been so clear about this for so many years, and we haven't really heard a cohesive strategy from Kamala Harris. I've been saying that there's a sophistication with Trump in terms of the economy. He is sophisticated about the economy that you're not really getting that from Kamala Harris. You've said that if Harris wins this election next month, you will remove your money from U.S. markets. You will sell and you will go all in on cash and gold. Is that right?
That's true. I think we're at a precipice between the two candidates. And if we go down the path of Harris, which is she wants to raise taxes, capital gains taxes, income taxes, corporate taxes, that's generally going to be negative for the economy and the markets.
Yeah, tell me about that, because she claims that she's only going to raise taxes on the highest earners. You think that trickles down?
It doesn't matter. If you put higher taxes, then there's less stimulus to buy stocks, less corporate earnings. So the earnings go down, the corporate tax rates go up, the individual tax rates go up. So generally, I think the market would go down. Plus, the other thing, the growth that we're getting in the economy today is almost entirely due to increased government spending. So the government spending this year rose by 14%. That's more than the entire growth we've achieved in the economy. But you can only do that for so long. Right now, the deficit's close to $2 trillion. The deficit spending is over 6% of the economy. So sooner or later, you're going to reach a wall. And we're coming near that point now.
And I feel like it's so disingenuous of Kamala Harris to talk about plans to rein in inflation by, getting corporations to admit that they've been price gouging. It's so disingenuous to not recognize the $7 trillion in spending on how we got there.
Yeah, that's because they don't really have an economic plan. Their plan is spend, spend, spend. Increase government spending, increase taxes, increase the deficit. That doesn't work.
But do you have a plan for the debt and deficits? I know President Trump has said it's about growth, but in a practical way, how do you envision the next 4, 5, 10 years in terms of putting a dent into the debt and deficits?
Well, President Trump has made two goals. He wants to bring down inflation, and he wants to bring down interest rates. And to do that, you have to contain and bring down the deficit. And he's got policies to do that. One is by constraining spending. For instance, the tax incentives for the Green New Deal, subsidizing uneconomic forms of energy, such as solar, wind, electric vehicles, cost about $1.2 trillion over the next 10 years. So eliminating those subsidies is a pretty significant reduction in spending. By putting tariffs, we've put an average 15% tariff on the $3 trillion of imports. That's $450 billion of incremental revenues. Growth will add incremental revenues. So by reducing spending, increasing revenues, the deficit will come down.
President Trump has also talked about really capitalizing on the energy capacity in America. He says, look, if you put more oil on the market produced by America, you're going to get oil prices down. Is it as simple as that?
I think so. We put a lot of constraints on domestic energy production. Biden put a moratorium on any new LNG facilities. So by providing incentives for energy production, that will increase the supply of energy, which should result in lower prices.
Now, President Biden has been praising Kamala Harris and her role in passing the Inflation Reduction Act. He did so again yesterday, and she has admitted that she was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act. Watch this.
One of the proudest things I've ever done was pass the Inflation Reduction Act that allowed us to negotiate lower prices for prescription drugs. Not a single Republican voted for this, with Democrats in Congress, and Kamala, by the way, cast a tie-breaking vote to make sure it happened. Don't tell me one vote doesn't count.
So he's bragging about it, John, and I also asked Senator Bernie Sanders from Vermont about that spending spree when he joined me on Sunday Morning Future Sunday. Watch this. In the 4 years where we saw inflation spike to up 9.1%, it came on the heels of all of that spending, $7 trillion in spending. Did you go overboard with the spending after COVID?
Look, Maria, I will never forget, and I think your viewers will never forget, the kind of world we were living in during COVID. People were flocking to hospitals.
Absolutely.
Couldn't accommodate them. You know, small businesses were going under. People were afraid to go to work. People were dying going to work. We responded. And by the way, if you look at Joe Biden's popularity record, you know when he was most popular? It's after we passed the American Rescue Plan. We saved childcare. We saved hospitals. We saved colleges. So I don't apologize. But to your point, take a look at the kind of profits that are in the food industry, in the oil industry. They've been raising their prices exponentially and ripping off the American consumer, in my view.
Now, I know that the margins of those companies are very tiny, so I don't know how they're price gouging. But your reaction to his defense of all that spending, John?
I think the act should be, you should drop reduction. It should have been called the Inflation Act.
That's right.
Inflation under Biden has been over 20% cumulatively since he's been elected. Under Trump was just over 7%. So Trump managed the economy much better, much lower inflation, growth in real wages. And I'd expect the same if he's elected again.
So what do you make of all of these polls that are so tight, and the money as well? John, I mean, Kamala Harris has the edge when it comes to money over Donald Trump. Harris's campaign raised nearly $222 million in September, pushing her fundraising total to $1 billion. The Trump campaign brought in $63 million last month. But he's lagging her money raise. You were among the key people who raised money for President Trump, and you continue to do so. What's the story here?
I don't think the amount of campaign cash is going to have that big an impact on the campaign. Trump won in 2016 and raised much less than his opponent did. I think the better indication than polls are the betting odds, and that has right now Trump ahead 60-40. And I think the momentum is clearly in President Trump's favor. And I think at this point it's more likely that he will be elected.
Which betting sites do you look at? Because I looked at Polymarket, and Polymarket, he's at like 64% or something. She's at 38%. Then there's Kalshi, also putting him at 60%, her in the 30s. Do you look at those?
Yeah, I look at both, and
they're
both showing similar results between 60 plus versus 40 minus.
And why do you think the betting sites are better than the actual polling that shows such a tight?
Yeah, the pollings are biased. They proved to be biased and incorrect before. The betting odds are a real indication of what what the odds are for the election.
Well, it's clear that you have a serious sophistication about the economy and about money as well, John. Are you the next Treasury Secretary? Should Trump get in?
You know, we'll have to see. We haven't crossed that bridge yet. I'm, willing to help out. I'd like to see the economy do much better. I think he's got a very good economic program, and if implemented, will result in continued prosperity for Americans.
All right, real quick, hypothetically, let's say you get that job as Treasury Secretary. Your number one priority on day one will be?
Extending the Trump tax cuts. The tax policy was very, very helpful. The economy grew. That's the most important thing. Second is to bring down public spending, to get rid of these subsidies. Third is to protect American industries through tariffs. And fourth would be to work with Elon Musk to, bring down the cost of regulation and the number of regulations.
Yes, President Trump told us he's going to be Secretary of Cost Cutting, which we like. Not a cabinet position, but a new role. John, it's great to get your take on all of that.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you so much for being here.
Bye-bye.
John Paulson. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Senior Republican Commissioner on the Federal Communications Commission, Brendan Carr, accusing Facebook in an X post over the weekend of censoring information again. The fact that Vice President Kamala Harris has failed to connect even one person to the internet, despite leading the administration's $42 billion internet infrastructure plan for over 1,000 days. Facebook labeled this post as, quote, false information from an FCC commissioner. Okay? They fact-checked it with the Biden-Harris administration. So then they determine it's false. That label has since been removed. And in a statement to Fox Business, Meta says this, quote, publishes clear rating guidelines for third-party fact-checkers who independently review and rate content. But in this instance, the rating fell outside of those guidelines, and so we have removed it. That means busted. Joining me now is the man himself, Commissioner Brendan Carr. Commissioner, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. I want you to walk us through what happened here, because you also have an op-ed in the Journal where you talk about the $42 billion fail of Kamala Harris, the internet infrastructure plan that Harris agreed to lead, and how the Biden-Harris administration recently confirmed that those construction projects will not even begin until next year at the earliest, and in many cases, not until 2026. You write this: instead of focusing on delivering broadband to unserved areas, the administration has used the program to advance a wish list of political goals. Commissioner Carr, tell us more.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. Here is the information about Vice President Harris's record that both Facebook and the administration itself don't want the American people to know. In 2021, Vice President Harris agreed to lead the administration's signature $42 billion plan to connect millions of Americans to the internet. Back then, Vice President Harris said we can get the job done today. Well, flash forward to today, it's been now 1,072 days since she took the helm of this program. And as you noted, not one single American has been connected to the internet. Not even a single shovel's worth of dirt has been turned. And calling that out resulted in a now false and debunked fact check. But that's the information that the American people should be having access to right now.
So where's the money? What did they use the money for? Let me guess. They used the money for illegals.
Most of the money is still sitting there. They spent some of it hiring government workers to plan to eventually connect people. So the good news is we can still course correct here. But the problem is, as you noted, they've been pursuing progressive policy goals over the last 1,000 days. So they've adopted implementing regulations that have DEI requirements, a climate change agenda. One state broadband official that's been dealing with the Biden-Harris administration on this says that it has been a chaotic implementation environment, dysfunction, delay. Politico says it's sort of frustration and finger pointing at this point. So it's a real microcosm for some of the concerns that people have.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I said that half facetiously, given the fact that they're using money in FEMA for illegals, according to Karine Jean-Pierre 2 years ago. Look, the conservative watchdog Center for American Rights filed a formal complaint with the FCC, accusing CBS News of distortion for airing that edited answer from Vice President Harris's 60 Minutes interview. Let's talk about this for a second, because I want to show the unedited video that was used to promote the interview, followed by the edited version, which actually aired on 60 Minutes. Watch.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
Well, Bill, the work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We're not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
Wow, that is infuriating, Commissioner. Really, when you look at those completely different answers, it's clear that the second answer was actually not even part of the first answer. I mean, they may have actually taken the second answer from a different question and just inserted it in there. What do you want the FCC to do here in terms of CBS's local New York station, WCBS?
Yeah, my FCC colleague, Republican Commissioner Symington, has been very active on this. What he's pointed out is the news distortion rule is a very, very narrow rule at the FCC. In almost every case, it doesn't apply because it could get into sort of editorial decisions that are protected by the First Amendment. But what he said is that CBS should release the transcript. And the reason why this complaint is not frivolous is because the rules say, for instance, the example we've given is if you take an answer to a question that is a yes, and you replace the answer of no from a different question, that's something that would potentially fall within the news distortion rule. My position is I agree with Catherine Herridge. She was a former CBS reporter. She has said that she thinks, just as a matter of journalistic practice, CBS should release the transcript. And I think that's right. I don't think this needs to be a federal case because I think CBS should release it, and then that would, inoculate entirely CBS from that FCC complaint.
So they haven't released it. They're staying firm on that. Why not? I mean, why not just put this issue to bed by releasing the transcript so that everybody can know where that second answer came from?
Well, that's exactly what Catherine Herridge said. In fact, she walked through a timeline that showed to be consistent with CBS precedent to do this. I think she noted that she had an interview with President Trump back in 2020 that they ultimately released the full unedited transcript. And so I think she's right, just as a matter of journalistic practice and newsworthiness, that people want to see this. In fact, I know people are reaching out to their local affiliates right now, asking them if they would release that transcript.
So, I mean, what's going on? Is there politics driving things as well here? I mean, we know the FBI has completely become politicized, the CIA politicized, even the DOJ potentially with their, vows to end voter ID. What's going on at the FCC? I mean, the FCC is allowing a nonprofit group funded by George Soros to take control of radio giant Audacy after the company went bankrupt. Odyssey, weeks before the presidential election. How is he able to take over all of these radio stations right before the election? The deal effectively gives the Soros family control of 200 radio stations plus, more than 200.
Yeah, this is really concerning. This decision by the commission is unprecedented. We've never, at the agency level, adopted a fast track to approve this. We have rules on the books that would have required this Soros-backed entity to go through a national security review before obtaining these licenses. That would have taken 3 to 6 months. But for the first time ever, the commission created a special Soros shortcut. And it's concerning because I think that your last name should not determine how the government treats you. But a lot of American people have been looking at the government over the last couple of years, and they see weaponization. If your last name is Musk or another last name, you get the book thrown at you for no reason at all in many cases. If your last name is Soros, you get streamlined treatment where you get to skip the normal review process. And I think that's the fundamental problem that so many people are concerned about.
Well, that's right. And I'm glad you brought up Musk because it seems like Elon Musk gets much different treatment than other electric car makers. I mean, he's the leading electric vehicle maker, and yet he's not getting the same subsidies that the others get with their unions. And then remember that new speech from the Democrat FCC chair when she floated the word monopoly in context of Starlink.
Yeah, this is concerning. I mean, so look, you go back to the Trump era, we awarded over $800 million to Starlink to connect hundreds of thousands of Americans, including locations that were in western North Carolina that ended up being hit by Helene. And the FCC back then said, well, Starlink's not really reliable high-speed internet. Well, flash forward to today. Now the private sector and FEMA are rushing Starlink kits into that exact same part of Western North Carolina, and FEMA saying it's reliable, high-speed internet. And so it's this regulatory lawfare has consequences. The New York Times just did a graphic that showed the cavalcade of administrative agencies and law enforcement bodies that are taking actions on Elon Musk that seem very disproportionate and seem like they can only be explained by politics.
Really discouraging when virtually the entire government has been politicized and you don't really know what's actual real and what is just politically laced. It seems like it's all politically laced. Commissioner, thanks very much for your leadership. We're going to continue talking with you along the way. Thank you, sir.
Donald Trump just received a very significant endorsement from the steel workers in Pennsylvania. Watch this.
The president that saved the steel industry with tariffs. You saved it with tariffs. Thank you. And you're my hero, and you're the greatest president ever.
We love you.
We love you. So, steel workers for Trump and the rank and file Mon Valley Works want to endorse you. We want to give you a hard hat.
That's a significant endorsement, I would say. Richard Tyke is the vice president of the USW Local 1557 Powerhouse, and he joins me now. Richard, do you think tariffs are going to fix the steel industry? I ask because the industry desperately needs a lot of money, and we're not sure where it's going to come from.
The tariffs so far has helped us out significantly. He put tariffs on in his first, when he was president the first time. And without him doing that, there was a lot of steel being dumped from China. So when he...
Your job in particular?
No, I don't find immigration to threat the steel workers down here. It's hard for us to get people to work here. I mean, it's society alone, you know, with the kids, and nobody wants to work no more. But immigration, we don't have that problem here.
Across the board, do you think that Trump gets a really significant proportion of blue-collar union votes?
Yes, I do. U.S. Steel owns some facilities out in Minnesota. It's Key Tech and Mintech. They reached out to me yesterday, and they said at least 75% of the workers there are in support of Trump. And the whole Mon Valley down here, I would say it's even higher than that, you know.
Okay. You guys are in support of Trump. I got it. Richard Tyke, thanks for joining us this morning. Always appreciate it. And we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Again, going to Texas, the reddest of red states, might seem a little bit unusual, but there might be a strategy here that some others are missing. Mark Cuban would know, a very savvy businessman, became a billionaire from nothing, being that savvy businessman, a big backer of Kamala Harris. Mark Cuban with us now. Mark, always great to have you. Thank you for taking the time.
Always a pleasure, Neil.
Do you think there's any strategy to going to Texas? You know, I understand with Beyonce and all of that stuff. I understand she has a lot of celebrities backing her. You're like a celebrity billionaire yourself. But is it really wise this close to the election to, as some of our critics in the Democratic Party have said, wasting your time there?
No, I mean, where you do an event is less important these days because of social media and just digital media in general. Everything's going to get sliced and diced and put online, and, you know, people are going to scroll and see it. So where she does it, you know, is less important.
So let me ask you about some of the things she said that have riled a lot of folks, pounding this fascist theme about Donald Trump. Well, Speaker Mike Johnson and Mitch McConnell in the Senate are out saying she should end this kind of rhetoric, saying here that the vice president may want the American people to entrust her with the sacred duty of executive authority, but first she must abandon the base and irresponsible rhetoric that endangers both Americans' lives and institutions. They're saying she went too far. Do you think constantly referring to Donald Trump as a fascist goes too far?
No. I think he's called Kamala Harris a Marxist, a communist, disgusting, not intelligent, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The man is the king of name calling. And if you're going to call everybody a name, you better be able to take it. And I can't help it if he's not able to stand up to it.
I think what they're referring to, though, and I hear where you're coming from, Mark, is that the two attempts on Donald Trump's life, you know, come at a time when things are pretty tenuous. And that only feeds the negativity, the volatility. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, right? You know, when you have two idiots that we really don't know why they did what they did, and it was horrific what they did. I mean, you could also make the argument that if Donald Trump tamped down his rhetoric, it would be a lot easier to say the same thing of her. But he keeps on amping it up. And so, you know, again, you never want to see an attempt on anybody's life, particularly Donald Trump, but it goes both ways.
Mark, what happened between you guys, you and Donald Trump? You used to speak highly of him and he of you. Where did it go wrong?
I don't think it went wrong. I mean, if he, wants to go to dinner, he wants to have a drink. When he won't drink, I'll drink. We hang out. He's fun to hang around. He's got a great personality. He's charismatic. But I think he was a lousy president before. I think he'll be a worse president this time. And it has nothing to do with personality. It has everything to do with ability.
Well, you never know what he's been saying about you since. Quoting here, Mark Cuban is a loser. He wrote this on Truth Social. Wouldn't take his phone calls anymore while at the White House, and he went rogue, a weak and pathetic bully. He's got nothing going, really low club head speed, a total non-athlete. I don't know what the total non-athlete thing meant, but what did you make of that?
I didn't. I don't care. I mean, but going back, if he's going to, he amps up rhetoric all the time. That's who he is. He wants to be divisive. He wants to be denigrating. And look, I can outdrive him any day, all day, every day. And so he can come to one of my classes where we do the box jumps and everything in terms of athleticism. But bigger picture, it doesn't matter. And I'm not running. But the fact that he gets all amped up and finds a need to come back at me. That tells you his ability to focus. That tells you how much time he spends on policy and trying to learn things. And that really was the underpinning of why I stopped supporting him back in 2016. Because the more I talked to him about policy, the less, engaged he was. The more I asked him what he's been learning, there was always a non-answer. You can't find a time where you said, wow, that was really a nuanced position and conversation with Donald Trump about this or that policy. It's always just talking points and sound bites, no depth at all, ever. So he has to resort to True Social posts.
You're not a fan of those posts, I guess. But let me get your take on where he's got the backing of at least half the American people. So a lot of them see maybe all of these flaws, or whatever you want to call them, and his mannerisms and his temper and all that. Maybe they see some of the dangers if he comes to office, that he would be vindictive. We just don't know. But are you saying that if he were to become president, some in your party have said, I don't even know if you're a Democrat or Republican,
I'm not,
that they would leave the country. They would leave the country. Is that a little crazy or extreme?
Yeah, that is a little crazy. And I've heard Republicans who tell me in Texas that if Kamala wins, they're leaving the country too. But just listen to what Donald says. Mass deportations, showing up and doing, checks on the street to see if somebody has their papers right. He's talked about the enemy within and going after American citizens. He has no care for freedom of speech. He wants to take away the license of CBS, even though CBS doesn't even actually have a license. Their affiliates do. I mean, that's just who he is. He doesn't get into any details. And so it's going to engender a lot of extreme responses.
But your candidate engenders some extreme responses too, right? And you've been critical of sometimes the way the message gets out, not necessarily the underlying message. I hope I interpret it correctly.
Yeah.
But you had said that the Harris team, well, they're not great salespeople. What did you mean by that?
I mean, look, we've all had to deal with people who are just consistent, nonstop salespeople. They're just relentless, and the content really didn't matter to them. They're just going to bother the hell out of you. That's Donald Trump. On the flip side, we've also dealt with salespeople who maybe aren't salesy, in that regard, but the content and the product and the service is great. That's the difference between the two of them. Donald Trump isn't about content. He's not about substance. Kamala Harris is. Donald Trump, he's going to sell, and, more power to him. But the good news is Kamala has a better product, so it's an easier sale. So she doesn't have to be as relentless a salesperson as Donald Trump is.
When a lot of Americans are polled on the candidates, as you know better than anyone, Mark, they long for the days of Donald Trump, at least the first 3 years of Donald Trump. COVID, of course, everything was off kilter then. And there's been criticism of how he handled COVID itself. I think you've been among those. But that they miss those days. They miss the low inflation. They miss the soaring job growth, even though Joe Biden's had pretty soaring job growth himself. But are they getting it wrong when they are leaning to that Are they missing something? Because they would turn around and say you were missing something.
Of course, but I do think they're missing a lot. I mean, we had more deaths in the military under Donald Trump. We had riots under Donald Trump that he refused to take responsibility for. And when he tried to take some responsibility, his line was, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. He wasn't trying to diminish that at all. We had January 6th. I mean, think about it. The person closest to him in office, Mike Pence, people were chanting, hang Mike Pence. If someone was chanting, hang Neil Cavuto, I would do anything to help you, Neil, and I'm assuming you would do the same for me. If he doesn't have the character to be able to stand up when somebody is screaming to hang somebody he knows, that's just wrong. You can't just dismiss that. You can't just dismiss him saying he wants 10,000 whatever votes from Georgia. You can't just dismiss, the fact that when there was a bombing, it was Syria or Iraq, I forget, and there were 200 service people who were injured. Many of them had traumatic brain injuries, and he said they're just headaches. I can go down a long, long list of things that people, don't remember. And look, it's not their job. People are just trying to live their lives on a day-to-day basis. So no one expects everybody to go in there and do a detailed analysis of his presidency. No. But, that Trumpnesia is overcoming a lot of judgment.
Still, this administration criticizing anyone on foreign policy or soldiers or deaths in light of Afghanistan and that horrendous pullout, that's kind of standing on a glass house.
Afghanistan was horrific, right? Neil. There's no question it was horrific. But when you look at the actual numbers, fewer people have died, American soldiers have died under Joe Biden than under Donald Trump. And that's just a fact.
Let me step back and get your sense of tariffs, because a key part of Donald Trump's new economic initiative, if he gets back in the White House, is to slap severe and huge tariffs, largely on China, the likes of which we've never seen. Now, I know Kamala Harris has been critical of that, but by and large, the Biden administration, with her, have kept most of the tariffs that were in place under Donald Trump under them as well.
So let's just look at that, right? During the Trump administration, he got his butt kicked by China in a trade war. Soybean farmers got destroyed. But in any event, in terms of the tariffs that was kept, before he left office, the first thing that happened was the tariffs from China went down. I think they went down from 25% to 15% to 7.5%. And so those tariffs that were kept are at a much slower rate and are far more strategic. And then there's the tariffs with the EU. Joe Biden signed an agreement, a treaty with them, saying there'd be no bidirectional tariffs for at least 5 years. And so while it's true that there were some tariffs that were kept, most of them were strategic. And in some cases where they're strategic, and I've always said strategic tariffs are great, for EVs and steel and other things, he increased those. Look, no one's complaining if Donald Trump wants to come in and do strategic tariffs. It's the fact that he wants to do across-the-board tariffs. I think what people don't realize is the things you buy for Christmas. We're getting to the point where we're looking at Christmas presents now. Fast forward a year where we're looking at presents. If Donald Trump institutes a 60% tariff on imported Chinese goods, most of those presents you're looking at buying for your kids, your family, your friends, they're going way up, 60% or more. And when that happens, not only do you buy less and your kids don't have the Christmas that you want them to have, but the small businesses, medium business, large businesses, they suffer even more, because when their businesses decline in the fourth quarter is their entire business, when they book everything, they're going to get crushed. And it gets worse from there. When you look at tariffs, there's always retaliatory tariffs. China came back and set tariffs. So, farmers who wanted to export soybeans, there were stories written about farmers committing suicide.
So you're worried the tit for tat gets out. You're worried the tit for tat gets out of control.
Yeah, he got crushed last time.
He disagrees with that characterization. But let me ask you a little bit about mixed messages we get, even from Kamala Harris. You had wanted to clarify, I don't know why you felt the need to do so, that she will not raise the capital gains tax. But many point out she's raising a lot of other taxes on corporations and the rest. And she says she's going to spare those who make $400,000 or less. But the fact of the matter is, she is targeting the rich. That would be people like you, because she argues people like you don't pay your fair share So that's got to trouble you somewhat, doesn't it?
No. So let's go through. So what she's not doing is she's not going to do a tax on unrealized capital gains. That was in Joe Biden's budget. It's never ever been proposed. It was wrong when he put it in there. It's still wrong. It's not going to happen. So that's one issue. Two, she says she's raising the capital gains tax to 28%. I can live with that. That's not going to change anybody's behavior. Corporate taxes. Let's look at what's going on there. There are
You don't think that would change? Maybe not for you, but you don't think someone who sees that tax on an investment or real estate or any purchase now suddenly up to 28%, it might be just a blink for a billionaire like yourself.
No, that's
but
not
for
what
a lot
she's saying,
of people,
Neil.
it could make a big difference, right?
It's not a tax on an investment. It's a tax on your gain once you reach a certain threshold. So you've already done really, really well if you've reached a threshold of 28, where it's going to be taxed 28%. So we're not talking about, you just
well, that doesn't
sold
matter
your
if
house.
you're rich or poor, right? It doesn't matter if you're going to be taxed at 28% versus 21%.
No.
Threshold or no, right?
No. If you're under the threshold, your rate's not going up, as best I can remember, right? But
well, what about the fairness thing then? That fairness issue, it keeps coming up, and for the life of me, and I've heard this for decades covering this issue that the rich aren't paying their fair share. I remember Bernie Sanders talking about the time the top rate was 90%. We're a long way from there, Neil, he would say. Then it got down to 72%, and 40, wherever we are. I think we're 37 now is the top rate. And I'm just wondering, what do you think is a fair take for the rich to pay?
It's really contextual. When our deficit is where it is, you're going to have to charge a little bit more. If we get the deficit down lower, and the deficit's been dropping the last 3 years, the percentage of GDP has been dropping the last 3 years. If we can get it lower, then I can make an argument that there's no reason to raise them. But that's part of reducing the deficit.
On this race, a lot of people wonder, it's close right now. I have no idea how the election will sort out. But if Kamala Harris were to lose, do you think she would accept that defeat and concede the election?
100%. No question
Do you
at all.
think Donald Trump would do the same if he
No
won?
chance at all. No chance. None.
So you're very convinced, because they do have batteries of lawyers each side who seemingly poised and we're like a coil spring to pounce whatever the results are, right?
Yeah, but one trusts the rule of law. The other one does not trust the rule of law.
So your sense is that Kamala Harris, even if she lost a close election, she would acknowledge that. Yeah. And since she is the vice president, she would have to put the finishing stamp on the Electoral College vote, and she would agree to do that.
Absolutely, 100%, no doubt in my mind.
All right, let's turn it around and see if she gets elected president. What cabinet position will Mark Cuban have?
None. Absolutely none. I don't want one. I don't want to work for the government. I have a company, costplusdrugs.com, that's killing it. We're changing healthcare. That's one of the great things about Kamala Harris. You've heard her talk about PBMs, pharmacy benefit middlemen, and really taking a hammer to them. You've seen her talk about transparency, which will reduce cost of medications for families and households by 20, 30% or more. I think I can have more of an impact on healthcare in general with costplusdrugs.com and just doing what I do as an entrepreneur and CEO as opposed to working for the government.
So you wouldn't have an Elon Musk role in a Trump administration. I think Donald Trump has said he would be his cost cutter secretary.
Yeah, but look, even Elon's got
it up.
Yeah, to me, I would follow the law and say if I wanted the cabinet position, which I don't, I'd have to divest everything that I'm doing, and I don't want to do that. I don't see how Elon actually has a cabinet position or a real position inside an administration because of all the conflicts of interest that he would have. I mean, I don't see how that works. Now, in the past, even with Donald Trump, I've been an advisor. I helped him, I helped Peter Navarro find a company in the United States that did masks and helped them grow. I helped Donald Trump when they were talking about health care and getting rid of the ACA. I pray that he is not president, but I'll do what I can to help my country first, second, and last.
Mark Cuban, always a pleasure seeing you. Don't make yourself a stranger.
Joe. Thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
Mark Cuban. Always remember, Mark, was when FBN started, just with the same when FNC started, we had virtually no viewers. He would come on and talk to us. Sometimes we would lie and tell him there were many, many more watching than was the fact. But whether you are a Republican or Democrat, that's a pretty bold thing to do.